podcast. How are you doing today, Todd?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. We just got done with the 4th of July. How was your 4th of July?
It was good. It was good. We blew up some fireworks and everyone was safe. All limbs came back, all digits. So that's always a blessing. So yeah, no, it was good. We grilled out some hot dogs, hamburgers, American tradition. So how about you? How was yours?
Probably the same.
That's the 99.9% of people.
Although I don't like shooting off fireworks.
I don't like personally shooting them off, but I do like looking at them. So,
yeah,
is that what you mean? I mean, as far as you
Yeah.
personally happen to light,
I don't
yeah.
like lighting
Yeah,
fireworks.
me neither.
Exactly.
It goes back. I think when I was in high school, I was at a buddy at my house, Jason, and you had bottle rockets, right? The bottle rockets, and he decided to put like a whole pack of those on his roof, and I was up there with him in a Mountain Dew can. And then right before like it getting ready to lift off, the can falls right at us. And so those things start just blowing up right as, keep in mind, we're on a roof. So you talk about like when you hear the stories, when you see the articles of people doing like stupid stuff, like that was us. And so two of those things though peppered me right on the leg and burnt my leg. So like, just ever since then,
These were bottle rockets?
Bottle rockets, yeah. Like the Black Cats or whatever. Yeah, and so ever since then, I'm just a little leery with fireworks. You're getting too close.
So you got shot on the rooftop.
Yep, Jason Miss Pagels. So
with bottle rockets. You have been forever. You have been forever
scarred.
Yeah. I knew a kid, Grant, who had some kind of firework in his hand. It blew his hand off.
Did it really? Yeah, you read those stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, from time to time.
All sorts of reconstructive surgeries and.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well, listen. So 4th of July, that's passed. I'm glad. Our topic for today: the life and teaching of Jesus Christ. What do you think about all that?
Well, as a believer of Jesus, I think it's very important part of following Jesus. We'll start with that, but I think it's obviously a broad topic. I mean, there's through the Gospels, there's just a lot of meat there, that you can talk about. I think today, specifically focusing on several areas with the Sermon on the Mount, love, humility, forgiveness are some of the main issues and topics we want to cover, in his teaching specifically. But I think as a follower of Jesus, I think this should be a central focus for those of us as believers. To obviously being created in the image of God, the purpose of it all is the gospel. And I think as we dive in, just thinking of it kind of more of kind of the context of the teachings in the life of Jesus is, as we dive in and specifically on the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5 and through 7 is just in Matthew as a whole, it talks about there's several things before and after in chapter 4 and 9. He kind of bookends it with that Jesus went throughout proclaiming the gospel and doing healings and meeting the afflicted. And he kind of bookends it with almost the same verses. So it's kind of I think this is a central focus of the breakdown of a gospel, is that this is the life and teachings is that Jesus is doing a lot here. And if we're going to emulate and follow him, I think this is a good place to start, and looking at his life, looking at his teachings, how we're supposed to live and inherit the kingdom of God is what Matthew mentions here. So I think it's a great topic.
And even if you don't believe in God, these are still good things to follow.
Absolutely.
Love, humility, and forgiveness.
Yeah.
They're still good items. So love, emphasize Jesus' teaching on loving others, including his enemies. And the verse is, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. This is a tough thing to do in life.
Yeah.
This is a very, very tough thing to do. Well, I think in my own life, I think the biggest thing is when I run across people who I would consider enemies, or, those who persecute you. I think I run into a lot of these people
Mm.
in my daily life. In fact, I keep a list of them. Have you ever seen that Adam Sandler movie, Billy Madison?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
been a while, but
he's
yeah.
got his list.
Yeah, that's right.
I won't. I don't have that kind of a list,
Yeah.
but I actually have a list of, I would say, enemies. I even title it enemies.
Mm.
And one of the things that I do is in my prayer book, when I'm going through my prayer book and reading through it, one of the things I do is I actually specifically pray for blessing for each one of those people,
Mm.
whether it's an enemy or it's somebody who's persecuted. Like, I take the time to identify them, write down their information, and then pray for them. And that can be anybody who I run into. That can be somebody that I didn't have a good interaction with. That could be somebody who is, maybe trying to sue me for something, whatever it is. But I'll tell you that just getting to the point of looking at their name and then reading it back and then praying that back to God is a really hard thing to do.
Mm.
And when you're not feeling good, it's even harder to do. But, just praying that back, Lord, bless that person, bless them in their life, help to come to know you. I think that's a practice. And I think it keeps you, for me, it keeps me, from holding grudges.
Mm.
Keeps me from, keeping things in my heart against those people that aren't healthy.
Mm.
And it also provides healing, I think, because in the beginning it's hard to pray for that person. It's hard to communicate, but as you continue to do it, it gets easier and it gets easier and it gets easier. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my share
No, I think that's good. I think
love.
it's so, one, loving your enemies, and then praying for them, because I think prayer, love can come in a lot of different forms. Obviously, usually it's through acts, right? Deeds, or doing something good for people. But even if you do something good for people, do you really have a desire for blessing on them, right? Like, do you, and only in your heart if you truly do. But I think this love your enemies and pray for those who persecute, like praying for them, I think that's another step, like your list. I think that's amazing. One, I think it, like, to your point, and I kind of relate it to thankfulness. One thing I've learned from you is that thankfulness for the challenges, thankfulness for the tough things. And I think there's a release to that when you're thanking God for those things, which the word talks about. But it's in the same manner, praying for your enemies, there's kind of that release too, and it's really tough, I think, to do. I think our initial reaction, I think the human nature when someone's attacking you, or let's just say someone punches you in the face, obviously our initial reaction is we want to defend ourselves. We want to, we kind of want to attack back. I think that's the nature of most people. So one is to love them is so anti, I think, our nature, which Jesus shows us. But it's also praying for those, I think, a desire to bless those people who are persecuting you, those who are your enemies. And I think that definition can be obviously different for different people, what you consider an enemy. And ultimately, I think, obviously it's in your heart praying for those. I think it's a huge step. One verse I think that comes to mind for me is Jesus displaying this is on the cross. Being hung on the cross and asking the Lord to forgive those, that are obviously they do not know, right? For they do not know what they do, is sitting there after being, just obviously drugged through the city, getting stabbed. Just all of it, and then spit on, and just, if we're talking about the life and the teachings, the life of Jesus being hung on a cross as he's sitting there, and I can't imagine the pain, physically. And I know when we go through physical pain, you kind of just want your last focus is to be probably loving others, right? You're just focusing on probably your own pain. And so I think the magnitude of that love that he has, and in a sense, praying to the Lord to forgive them, which will lead to another, obviously, key point that we're going to talk about in the forgiveness. But I think that prayer is a key component, that second component of prayer, because I think it's asking for blessing, which is it's just so anti, I think, normal nature and culture, so I think it's powerful.
How do you live with beatitudes? What do you think about with humility and the beatitudes? How do you think about that? Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Hmm. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. I think, you know, I think humility is, obviously it's elevating, obviously, I think the others versus yourself. I think we've talked about this on other shows, is just that self nature, right, versus loving God. Like, what's our central focus? And I think the true humility is sacrificing self for the greater good of others, right? And not, I think that's as you're looking at the teachings and life of Jesus. I mean, no greater life than this, he who lays down his life for his friends. That's the ultimate sacrifice, is what Jesus did. But I think it's also just the love for others, right? The love for your neighbor. I think humility, the only way you can truly love others is to have just that humility nature as a person. Because if you're selfish and just thinking about you, you can't, how are you going to love someone else? Because you're always going to be focused on you, or how it's impacting you. I also think it's a little bit counterculture too, because the first part, blessed are the meek. I think, especially as men, I think we believe you need to be like, it's about the strong. It's about, hey, look at, like, I'm a bad dude, right? Look how good I am. And I think even the nature of when you get into business, you get into sports, it's just, I think it's all about the bravado a lot of times. And I think this is just that hey, blessed are those that are meek. And I don't think it's always about like, hey, I got to look weak, or look, that like I'm not strong, but it's, where's that source of strength, and where's my focus? Is it on myself, my ego, how it's my vanity, or is it about others and putting other people in front of me? That's what I think about it. Um, in my life, I'm not saying, I mean, obviously, it's, I think it's for others to decide, like, how that is, right? And how you live that out. But I think ultimately, I just think of love your neighbor as yourself. That's the verse I think about, because it's sacrificing your time, your energy, your money, towards the greater good of others, and loving them. So that's what I think, rather than focusing on you and what you get out of it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What about you?
I
When you
think
when you when you
I
read that?
kind of think of it like Jerry Rice. I'm a
Mm,
big believer in Jerry Rice. I love Jerry Rice, football player, wide receiver, San Francisco 49ers during the 49ers golden era. He'd score a touchdown, and he just tossed the ball over the shoulder.
Barry Sanders. I was thinking
You
that too
know,
when you said Jerry Rice.
there's no
Yeah.
there's no showboating, no crazy dancing, no, just hey, it's all about me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just nonchalant, cool, just kind of humble.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Just a hard worker, a grinder. You know, sometimes in a game might get one or two passes because he's super covered, whatever. You don't see him slamming his helmet on the sidelines. You don't see him throwing temper tantrums. So just as a sports analogy, I think just you know it's not all about me. And then I also think it's also about giving God the glory,
Mm-hmm.
and everything that happens, like making
Mm.
sure that God gets the glory, not you,
Yeah.
you know. And I think just honoring God first with a great job. No, thank you, God, for helping me get through it. Because I believe there's always a million little miracles that help you get through any success, you
Mm.
know, and work through any miss or any failure or any loss, right? So I think just staying focused on giving God the glory and not raising yourself above God's glory, making sure He's identified as you know the victor in the circumstance. So I think those things are how I would uh, live out um, humility and so forth.
I also think it's interesting, because I know this is on, later in the Sermon on the Mount, is in Matthew 6. It does talk about, when, and in the Word, I think there's a kind of what you do in secret too, because what Jesus talks about is For they want to be praised by others, right? When he's talking about the Pharisees and that kind of, hey, like getting praise from others
Yeah.
versus praise from God, and thinking about prayer, like go into your closet, right? Pray in secret, or giving. Don't let your left hand, right, no, or your right hand know what your left hand is giving, right? So it's almost like to that kind of that secrecy, and that's not just about, again, the kind of the vanity of it. That's what I think of humility. Like you said, giving God the glory, and not what is just seen, but what is. And I think that's also the power of prayer, is because it's a lot of times that people don't even know we're praying. But if it's like, hey, you only want to pray in front of people, which is the example that Jesus talks about. So yeah, that's a good message.
Yeah, it is good. And I think finally, we've got forgiveness, and the verse is, for if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. I think forgiving people is always a hard thing, but I think it's just something you have to do. Like you don't carry a grudge
Mm.
around with you, And I know that some people carry grudges, but I think that one of the things I've learned about just being in business, and this is one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs talk about a lot, uh, is don't hire friends and don't hire family. Like in a lot of business groups and a lot of like entrepreneurs organization groups or whatever it might be, one of the big tips is don't hire friends, don't hire family, don't hire friends. You'll hear that. You hear that sentiment over and over again. Don't go into partnerships with family. Don't go into partnerships with friends. You hear this a lot, and so just in my own life, like thinking when you start your business, it's normally your friends and family that you hire first. Those are normally the friends. Those are normally the people that work with you in the beginning. And I think that what happens is a lot of those relationships become ruined.
Mm.
And I would say that over the years, a lot of relationships with friends and family have been ruined with business relationships.
Mm.
And a lot of it can come from greed. A lot of it can come from jealousy. A lot of it can feel wronged,
Mm.
you know, like, I had a brother-in-law send me a text message and say, I'm not working for you. I'm not going to support you buying any more houses and living your crazy lifestyle. And I'm not going to support you in doing any of this anymore. And you don't even know what it is to work hard. You've never worked a hard day. Like this long rant and then another rant. Tough, right? Or even, my best friend Jason Knapp, who grew up being best friends with. This guy worked for me and was our mechanic. And when stuff got tough, we moved him into a project management role, and then it wasn't for him. He was a mechanic. He was a guy. So we amicably decided to say, hey, let's stay friends, and you go your way, and I'll go my way, and time goes on, and I remember we had our first kid. This is supposed to be my best friend. Like we were best men at each other's weddings, and like we have our first kid. He doesn't show up. He doesn't show up to say what's up. You know what I mean? And you think about that, and then some times goes by, and this particular person, they file some kind of a lawsuit through L&I claiming that their hand is damaged from, taking notes or something like that as a project manager. And they need all sorts of money to, live their life because they can't work their job anymore, And one, I didn't even know about it because they just filed this thing and it came in, and then somebody in the office looked at it and said, oh, yeah, we're going to deny that. And they denied it, and then they denied it. And then, they denied it. And then eventually, this person won on appeal. Jason won this thing on appeal. I don't know how much money he won. I don't know what it was, but um, those set of circumstances, uh, those set of circumstances were tough, right? Like, you go through that. This is my friend. This is somebody who I was best friends with. I would say was my best friend. But what happened? Some kind of something crept in there. And I don't know what crept in there on that side. And even after I learned about this legal, thing that went on with his L&I claim, like I was like, I texted him, I was like, man, if you needed to do an L&I claim because you feel like you hurt yourself, why don't you just let me know? I don't care. I'm not here to block. I don't care what you do. You know what I mean? I don't know right, wrong, or indifferent, but if you need to get it, whatever it is. Like, but let's still be friends. And I've probably text that person, 5 or 10 times over the last 10 years. Never heard a response once. You know what I mean? So, like what happened there? What happened in that person's life to say, I don't like you. I don't want to be friends with you. I don't want to communicate with you. I don't want to have anything there. How do you let 30 years of friendship get to that point? And so I think it goes back to like forgiveness. So I've always said like, hey man, I don't care about this L&I thing that happened many years ago. I don't care about what happened. Like we're friends. Like in my mind. And if Jason was to call me today, I would still be friends, because I hold no grudge. I hold no issue, on this particular scenario. And so I think just like in business and be careful how you can connect with people. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No. I think it's great. I mean, I think it's a good point because it also ties into the first point of love. Like, I mean, not saying that this is your friend, so it's not an enemy, but in the same manner, I think it's that there's a release factor. Like truly forgiving
Yeah.
somebody. That's a loving nature that to do. And it was funny. Just the other day, it can, as we're talking about this, and obviously, in that situation, obviously is different. But my kids, they sometimes fight over a toy, right, or something, right? Especially our two youngest are close in age. They're within a year of each other. They
Yep.
share room. They share toys. So there's going to be some battles from time to time. I had some with my siblings and whatever, and but it was funny because so what we always do, try to do is we sit them down, ask what's happening. You go into a room, you kind of hear some some little bit of yelling, a little bit of whatever's going on, maybe some crying. You walk in, kind of ask what's happening, what's going on, you kind of assess the situation, and then we always sit them down. And if someone is wrong the other, and after understanding the facts, which is always fun when you're having a 5 and 6 year old, to get the truth, which is pretty easy to tell when they're little, is we have to ask for forgiveness, right? And so it's funny because sometimes it's so hard for them to say, I'm sorry. And, and then the funny thing is it's just the other side. It's just as hard for that person to say, I forgive you. We try to teach them that and train them that in our house where, there's obviously, and it's funny because sometimes it's like, the stubbornness and the nature of the kids kind of varies, but that I forgive you is just as hard as the I'm sorry, piece of it. And so
Yeah.
whether it's fighting over tour, and I think it's just, obviously, but how it's funny how young that nature kind of is tough to do. And so, again, loving someone and having that forgiving nature, I think there is a release there. And ultimately, obviously, Jesus's sacrifice on the cross and God's forgiveness for our sins, I mean, and as we're talking about the life and teachings of Jesus and following those teachings, I think, it's living out that forgiving nature of Jesus,
I think so.
and I think and I think morally, obviously, if you're not a follower of Jesus, it's just, like you said, it can weigh people down. And in some ways, I mean, I think it's, I can't speak for your friend, but in some ways, I think the isolation, the weight and the burden sometimes by holding that grudge, can really impact someone's life, relationally.
Yeah.
We have relationships in our family too, that there's things that have happened or wrongs or whatever, and there's people that still won't show up to gatherings, and
Yep.
it not only the crazy thing is it not only impacts those maybe two individuals, if it's two people,
It's the collateral
it's
damage.
the collateral damage that
Yeah.
you see. So there's so much other impact there that can be a negative impact. So I think that and then on the other side, when I've seen it in our family too, when there is a reconciliation and you have that forgiveness, it's a beautiful thing when that happens, and the establish of relationships. We've seen that happen in my family too. Funny enough, it's kind of that same situation that we have and with a particular family member. And when we, this family these are immediate family that wouldn't talk to each other. And funny enough, it was, I'm not saying it was me, it was, but I took a trip out there to see them, and they live across the country, and just to it was on my mom's side of the family, and just to help reconcile that. And a couple of the people it did, now there's still some others that chose not to, and I can't, and, obviously that's their choice, but it was this, all of a sudden, this relationships, and that we're able to come back together and know each other and know the grandkids and know, things that weren't really
Yeah.
known before. And then it was years, we're talking decade plus type of hardship. So,
It rots you, man.
and it can just weigh somebody down, man, of hate
I think
and anger.
it rots you.
It does.
It rots you from the core, like
From the
my
inside out.
brother-in-law, right?
Yeah.
Hey, it's Father's Day. I text him Happy Father's Day. Hey, they had a kid like 2 months ago or a month ago. I text him, hey man, congratulations on your kid. There's no hate there for me. A response back, no. Still gonna deal with love. Still gonna
Yeah.
like. There's no hate in my heart. There's only forgiveness. Or if I've done a wrong to Jason or Zach or whoever it is, like, hey, I'm sorry. What can I do to make it right for you?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not living my life with your burdens.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I'm not living my life with your problems.
It's also in the past too,
and I'm
right?
not giving you my power.
So yeah, I think that's there's a release there too, and obviously you can't control their response. You can only choose to love, and obviously, like even Jesus, there was people who responded. We did talk about the cross. I mean, there's the prisoner next to him who responded to his love, and there's still those who may be hardened and resist, and whether it's pride or whatever reasons. So I think that's something that is we can control. We can't, obviously, and through God's grace and through prayer, through praying for them, we can choose to forgive. We can choose to love through God's grace, and then allowing Him to use that to work. I think that's the prayer, and that may be years. Like I said, I mean, it was over a decade. To reestablish relationship with my grandma and my
sometimes
mom,
they never come back,
and sometimes it never happens. So I think that's
the
sometimes
hurt.
there's unknowns.
But don't hold on. Like
yeah.
if you take one thing from this show today, like don't hold on to the grudge. Just let it go. Forgive.
Mm-hmm.
You will feel so much better. It's like a burden is lifted from your life. We're bringing this thing in for a close here, but the main points that we covered here was love. Live with love with your enemies. Love your enemies. Hardest thing to do, pray for your enemies. I create a list. I do that. Humility. Be humble. Kind of the Jerry Rice of life, if you will. We don't need to showboat and celebrate, and give God the glory. And then just forgiveness. Be okay to forgive family. Be okay to forgive friends. Try to understand and be compassionate, but just know that sometimes it's not on your plate and your shoulders. You can't get rid of it. Any final thoughts on your side, Todd, as we wrap this show up?
No, I just encourage. Wherever you are in your walk, and whether you believe and follow Jesus, or obviously you're curious and what's this Jesus guy all about. I think a great place to start is in the Gospels, and specifically a lot of these verses are in Matthew, but which is the first book of the New Testament, if you don't know. So I just encourage people to dive into the Gospels. I think it's a great place to start and learn about Jesus' teachings. And there's no greater teachings, and the point of that is love. There's no greater love what he does. And I think humility, forgiveness, I think these others follow love. I think that's the point. So, and even if you don't follow, I think you're going to morally, I think, live a good life if you're able to
Yep.
live these out. Yeah, great topic and great show.
Well, listen, thanks for tuning in. Um, next week we're going to be talking about something really, really exciting. So I encourage you to tune in. I'm not going to tell you what it is. It's going to be a secret. But tune in because we're going to be sharing something next week that's really exciting. Listen, and leave us some remarks. Leave us some feedback on LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you're at. Drop a comment in the comment box. We'll respond back to you. Follow me. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Follow me on LinkedIn. Direct message me on LinkedIn. Direct message Todd on LinkedIn. We're both hanging out there. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I'm hanging out. So give me a follow. Dave Wescott. If you like this show, give us a like, give us a share. Thanks for tuning in this morning, and we hope to see you next week.